No price talk and no Lambos. This is not another crypto podcast. Welcome to Ignition. I'm your host, Jillian, and each week we will be looking at the problems solved by blockchain. I'll be going deep with the people building the apps and communities which are changing the world around us. Welcome to Ignition, the EOS Dublin podcast. And today we have a very interesting guest, Adam Doftman, who is the CEO of IfWhenThen. So Adam, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jillian. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, now I have to ask you, where does the name come from? IfWhenThen. What does that mean?
Yeah, so IfWhenThen is probably one of the best kept secret for goal setting theories. So it's one of the leading motivational theories out there. And it's been shown when people thinking that if-when-then strategic thinking, that they're 2 to 3 times more likely to reach their goals. So they think in a more sequential way, a step by step. And so by reaching these goals, they achieve a deeper mastery of the skills.
Wow, because it sounds quite familiar. I thought it was a famous quote. I didn't actually realize it's actually a methodology, if you like, to achieve.
Yeah, it's actually supernatural. People don't even realize that they do it every day. But once you get into the habit of it, then you get into sort of these really powerful psychological effects come to surface, and you start thinking in a much more strategic way to your educational path.
Okay. So I was on your website, and I love the thing at the bottom. I'm going to just quote you this before I'm going to ask you to tell me about the project. You said Uber has no vehicles, Airbnb, no real estate, Alibaba, no inventory, and IfWhenThen has no content. So tell me, what is the project and how can you do it with no content?
Well, that's right. So IfWhenThen is a global education provider, but basically what it is it's a platform that connects graduate students to global employers through vetted non-formal education. So when you think about non-formal education, there's literally what's happened in the world is that more and more students have been going to formal education, and then they realize that the skills that they're acquiring are not right, are not a fit for the future marketplace.
May I interrupt you there? Could you define what non-formal education is, please?
Yes, exactly. So as a result of people realizing that they don't have the right skills for formal education, which is usually a certificate that's been approved by the government, and non-formal education are these new communities, mostly in the creative and tech sectors. And some of them are online, but many of them are offline training programs. And you don't get a certificate from the government, but more and more employers are turning to these non-formal communities that offer education in, let's say a year training to learn very specific skills to hire and fill their workforce.
And who are the people who are generating this education then? Is it companies? Is it groups? How does that work?
This is one of the big differences between formal and non-formal education. Formal education, you have academic types, people who often have no private sector experience. And in the non-formal sector industry education, it's mostly private sector people that are dedicating their time to educate young people with specific skills, because there's a huge global skills shortage, specifically in creative and tech sectors. So it's basically these smaller communities where people have decided, you know what, we can make a better training programs than what's currently offered at the universities. And we will invite private sector people to be the teachers and mentors to the program. And this is really, the non-formal education is really starting to make a lot of partnerships with the private sector. And they're starting to collaborate with each other, because the private sector can no longer wait for the universities to change their programs and so that they can get the talent that they need. I think one of the good examples is that even recently, Apple, Facebook, and others have decided that they no longer require employees to have a university degree, that it's okay if they can prove that they have the skills through self-development and these new non-formal training programs.
That is very interesting and you're right, because if you look at universities, especially in the tech sector, it takes so long for them to bring in AI, ML, and blockchain, obviously, it takes them a long time to actually incorporate them properly into courses, and they might have bits and pieces of it, but the lecturers themselves are not up to speed, so they're not up to, how can they bring in the courses? Tell me, how does it? Sorry.
And just to add one more thing, there's this thing that's happening sort of all over the world, and they're called hybrid skills. And basically, it's the idea that, you have this traditional education, but you need to find complementary skills to be really effective in the workplace, where you need not just programming and programming skills, you also need maybe some design skills, or you need some business acumen. So non-formal education is a quicker way to develop these sort of hybrid skills and make yourself more competitive in the workplace.
That's interesting. Now, I can totally get it when it comes to technology, because it moves at such a pace, right? And universities are very slow. We know that. How does it work in the creative field?
Well, I think a lot of it, the creative field and sort of the design communities and whatnot, a lot of it is understanding the marketplace, understanding the technologies and the people that you're working with. So you could be a great designer, but you have to be able to collaborate with others with a shared purpose to reach your goal. So this idea that everybody works in silos and doesn't understand each other or doesn't know how to collaborate with each other is just something that's kind of breaking down. And the most competitive companies are employing people that have hybrid skills and can understand each other and work towards a common purpose.
At the very start of our conversation, you said you're connecting graduates with employment employers.
Right.
But when you say you don't mean graduates from formal education. Do you mean graduates from anything, or
exactly
yeah.
From non-formal education? So imagine, a formal university is one big place where they have thousands and tens of thousands of students and lots of graduates. So naturally, employers have been going to this one portal to these big universities, and they hire from then. What we're doing is we're creating a collective networked economy around non-formal education. So these hundreds of non-formal education communities spread around where we're starting in the Central Eastern European regions and the Balkans. We're putting them all together, and then the ones that are the most vetted, so achieve a high search ranking based on some reputation factors. These graduates from these training programs are going to be pooled into one place and make it really accessible for global employers to fill out their companies in skills that continuously in industries that are fast growing and skills that are hard to find.
So on your platform, it's like a matchmaking option, I guess. Is it so that
that's exactly it.
So you're encouraging graduates to come on and employers to come on and communities to come on and find each other.
That's right. So it creates like this new sort of alignment. It's at one time, it's a marketplace for students so that it can discover the best training programs, and so that they have confidence that this training program is providing sort of a quality experience. Then at the same time, once they complete the program, we're then matchmaking the student with these global employment opportunities that wouldn't be available to them otherwise.
Wow, that's amazing. So people who, whether they're not a graduate of a formal university or whatever, they can go online and I guess find out the stuff that they're actually interested in, and then see what non-formal education, what options there. Wow. And then as they upskill in those communities, employers will be looking at the same marketplace and saying, I need someone with these skill sets, and hands up who's got them.
Exactly. So one of the main things is that to make a really efficient a collective networked economy in non-formal education, it's also about sharing information. And so we have, over time, it's a question of sharing information with students so that they can make good decisions, and sharing information with employers so that they can find the right training program to collaborate with and to find talent.
So tell me, how did you happen upon this idea? From your accent, you'll probably guess that you are actually a Canadian, but Did you attend formal education, or what's your background?
Yeah. So I have a Bachelor of Commerce in International Business, and I have an MBA in investment banking. So I have my background's in finance, but I think maybe what happened is that maybe 5 or 6 years ago, which is when I sort of started on this journey, I realized that as much as these were great industries, I could see the world changing, and I didn't feel like I was a part of it. And I didn't really see the options as well. It was very hard. People get stuck in this thinking where if I need a job, then they think like this. Okay, if I need a job and I don't have the skills, then I go to university. That's that if, when, then thinking.
Yes.
And it's been traditional that you just go to university to get a job, but that doesn't really work when you want to change industry, right? It's not
Yes.
as easy
Your
as
skills
that.
aren't transferable, so they're not as easily
They
recognized.
could be, but maybe employers won't recognize it. And at that point, it doesn't make sense for me to go and do a 4-year degree in computer science or something like that. It makes a lot more sense to, if I could find the right training program that's only 1 year long, and then I can transition into maybe an apprenticeship or maybe a startup company, or just land a job with one of the larger companies. But those options aren't available. So it's very important that, especially with the economy changing the way that it is, that the non-formal education collaborates with each other to make sure that students can discover these new paths and then discover the employment opportunity, whether it's a job or whether it's an apprenticeship or an internship. That's how, people have to do this more quickly in the future.
And it is true, because you were saying before we started recording this conversation about the way education is done traditionally. And you said earlier, people working in silos, or even in classrooms, kids sit in a line, they can't talk, the teacher fills them full of information. And and they've been educated for jobs that will not exist, they'll be replaced, or that jobs that we can't even figure out. So this is obviously, it's a lot faster. So whether or not you have a formal piece of education, and most people will have, obviously in the developed world, a formal piece of education, certainly up to the age of 18, but it means that you can transition faster and follow your interest and follow maybe the industry that is changing so rapidly. It's hard for us to view now. We can see things changing, things like, self-driving cars. Who'd have thought that was popular?
Exactly.
Or even, how smartphones have changed the world in the last 10 years, or social media. So we can see change. We just don't know what's coming down the line.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And so, right, the reality is that the university programs, the global university programs, are terrible at collaborating with each other.
Yes.
They don't share information. They really keep you almost out of the loop of what's going on in the world and what are your options. So really, in the future, students need more autonomy, more options, and a sense that they can control their destiny by taking one challenge at the time. Yeah. So basically by creating this sort of collaborative network economy in the non-formal education, students are going to be participating into the network, but everybody's going to be co-creating by providing feedback into what are the best options and what employers are looking for. So it's naturally going to create these global new pathways to make it a lot easier for students and employers to respond to these changes. So I don't think, you can optimize a horse carriage all you want, but it's not going to become a combustible engine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, or an electric car, which is what we need these days. So we can't optimize the traditional education system. It doesn't make any sense because it's too big and they're too set in their ways. So we think that by looking to the non-formal education, taking a collaborative networked approach and using blockchain as to align global interests, then we can really create co-create these opportunities for the economy to really support these new economies.
And I guess you're starting to answer my next question there already. Why did you choose blockchain? You already touched on some elements.
I think, yes, exactly. So a lot of people often say, do you need blockchain? And my response to them is, that's the wrong question. The question is, how can blockchain enhance your business model? So at the beginning, you need to have a super solid business model that addresses a well-defined global need. So there has to be, a clear global movement from one way of doing things to another, which we've clearly addressed here. People are moving from formal education to non-formal education. That's completely clear. And what blockchain can do then is that it can enhance this model by mostly bringing some greater transparency and data validation. So as far as the reputations that are acquired through the blockchain, you can make it so that you have more trust in those reputations, and the data is immutable. But at the same time, it comes down to now, what do you do with this data? And it's important to then share this data with the different stakeholders that are students, training programs, and global employers, so that in the collective network economy, people can make more market efficient decisions in response. So it's blockchain really enhances a really good business model that we've developed.
And I think the nice thing as well is that before blockchain, and I've had this conversation many times with other people, blockchain is collaborative. That's a huge word, and that's, before blockchain, everybody was talking, any entrepreneurial types were talking about, patents and IP and, all this hiding stuff and only, NDAs floating all over the place. And now with the blockchain, because it's open source, it's collaborative, it lends itself so much better to this kind of cooperation.
Absolutely. And that's really what we're talking about is we recently published an article on our website and in our blog about how blockchain transparency is perfect for the sharing economy. And it's perfect for a collaborative networked economy because of this ability to trust the data and share the data with everybody so that it goes to the edges of the network and everybody has access to it and can then make decisions based on what they're seeing. And they can support you also. So if they can see that sort of our performance is at a high level, they can support the project more easily with the token economy than they could otherwise.
What I love about it too, I was very lucky. I went to Trinity College in Dublin, and I used to always say, still do, I think, best 4 years of my life. I absolutely adored Trinity. And I studied history and English, and I had a fabulous time. And, I'd walk through front gate, and it's a beautiful college, and I just adored it. And I used to always, the idea of Cardinal Newman, he'd say the idea of a university, that thesis that he wrote back in the 18th century, whatever, about young men, obviously men of those days, coming together in that sort of, learning space. But I do recognize, and I said at the very start, I'm very lucky to attend a Trinity College in Dublin. Sure. And that was something because my parents believed in education, I had other family members who went to college. But if you were born into a family that maybe the family didn't go to college, that wasn't an option. It wasn't even thought of. And so it's, university is a huge privilege that we don't realize what a privilege it is until maybe you look around and you go, wow. And I was just listening to a local senator here in Ireland who went through the TAPS program in Trinity, the Trinity Access program. And she came from totally the wrong side of the tracks, and she's a senator now, which is amazing, and she's a politician. But, she did drugs, she had huge problems, ran away from home, had kids early, as a teenager, I think, and had a whole rake of things. And then, but through this program, she came through. So that's a wonderful thing, because obviously, if you like university, but there are so many people in this world who will not get near university. You're
probably right, but I actually think you don't need university.
No, I agree. So I'm just saying, I agree with you. I'm just saying, when I loved it, but if you haven't got a chance to go to university, how are you going to upskill yourself?
That's true. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And it's not that easy. And it could be quite daunting to somebody to commit for 4 years somewhere, and the financial and sort of the
especially in the US, you have all that student debt.
Which
I'm not too sure about Canada, but
absolutely, it's not just a time commitment; it's a money commitment.
Yeah.
But one thing that I would like to add, in one of the differences I think through university and non-formal education, and sort of this collaborative network economy that we're building here, is when you go to university, and I think this is an important distinction between the two futures that we're looking at, is that when you go to your class, they pretty much decide the when, where, and how. So they decide where you're going to study, what you're going to study, how you're going to study it, right? And sort of these type of questions. Now, in the future where things are moving more fastly, you now have to develop the ability to decide for yourself the when, where, and how. And that's where the if, when, then thinking comes from. And part of the problem in the world and in general is that people haven't developed the ability to make decisions for themselves when it comes to education. When you're making the decision for everybody, then they don't develop this ability to, once they graduate, how to then know what to choose to upskill. And the only thing, I guess, in defense of that is that they usually don't have access to the information because, it's not readily available what's growing and what's not growing. And it could take a lot of time and research. And so the IfWhenThen platform with everybody involved, students, training programs, and global employers, will make and the transparency of the data will make sure that we can provide data insights to all users as the platform grows, so that all they need to do is decide for themselves when, where, and how. And then they can start making, learn to make decisions with good information.
That is, I mean, I have to say, going back to my 4 years in Trinity, I majored in history, and I mean, I learned about origins of the Spanish Civil War, Reformation, Germany, all sorts of weird and wacky portions of history, because my professors were experts in those areas. And I mean, they had no bearing whatsoever on my life outside college. I thoroughly enjoyed them, but I love this idea because it democratizes education. And anybody can access what they need to access and what they have an interest in. They can upskill and then go and meet their employer in that particular area. I think it's a fabulous idea. So tell me, we're looking at blockchain, right? So then the next step, how did you choose EOS?
Well, I think, there's a lot of huge advantages to EOS. The first one is that it's probably at the moment, the most scalable platform as far as what they're able to do with the transactions per second, compared to Bitcoin is at 8 transactions per second, Ethereum 24 transactions, and EOS is already at 4,000 transactions per second. So, and it could be as many as 10,000 transactions per second later. So in our article that we published also, I really recommend readers to go through it. We talk about this. And when you're talking about sharing economy, you're talking about very large network effects, very large global network effects of interconnected marketplaces globally. To be able to decentralize some of the data points that we were talking about in this presentation, you need to be able to have a blockchain that can handle these type of transactions at no cost to the user. And so really there's kind of there's no other options. This is the best thing available. And I really strongly believe that when you look at EOS, there's also network effects implied into the EOS community. And we're just at the beginning. And more people are going to start. It's a great blockchain as far as with a global community, global block producers that are incentivized to give back to the community, which is something that you don't see in the other blockchains. So I think over time, the network effects of the blockchain and the community, the global community engagement is going to become stronger and stronger as the EOS purpose becomes more clear to everybody.
Wow. And you were saying that you're basing your project initially in Eastern Europe and the Balkans. How far are you on in the project?
So I've actually been in Eastern Europe for almost a year. We started with market research. We started with getting partners before we even built the technology. And this really allowed us to sort of develop this product market fit. And so we created a prototype, and now we're in beta version. We have over 100 partners with some of the top training programs. Many of them are on our board of advisors. They're on our community advisor team for the beta testing that we're doing over the next month. And so now we're really going to continue with this product market fit for a little bit, for about another 4 or 5 months with the testing of our beta version. And we're going to look to aggressively expand globally, because really that's the only way to get the network effects and the collaborative network economy that is needed.
As an entrepreneur, so you've upped sticks. You're a Canadian living now in Kiev, working in a different geography. Would you do anything differently? What have you learned? What are the milestones in your entrepreneurship that you've learned that you could share with this audience?
Well, I mean, it's super important to have a team, a really great team that is driven by the purpose of your project. And so the purpose of the project was known to me, but I didn't put it as well in the first few months. I was kind of just doing market research. But once I really defined the global problem and defined the shared purpose, something that everybody on the team can agree is really important and we need to work towards it, then I was able to get a global team, global support, local support. And that shared purpose is really what sort of binds your whole team together. And that's why we have an international team. So we have about 12 people on the team, but there's only 3 of us that are in Ukraine at the moment. And our CTO is in the United States. Our director of storytelling is in Florida. We have 2 people in Florida. So really, you need to have a strong purpose that's solving a global problem if you want to attract, the best talent. And then it's all about sort of execution at that point. I think, it's in a collaborative network economy, the shared purpose where anybody in the world can understand and relate to, sort of that minimum value transfer that you're going to be offering on the platform, is the big motivating factor to getting support.
What's been the hardest thing so far on your journey?
The hardest thing, there's always hard things.
Whoops.
No, I think it's always a challenge. It's, the focusing on the sequence of things is the most, not getting caught up in sort of the future possibilities, and just focusing on the sequence of everything in a step-by-step approach is very important. Also, coming from Canada, this is less of an issue for me because it's such a multicultural place. So I'm really used to the different cultures. And it makes it easy for me to kind of sort of blend in to new cultures. But not speaking the local language and then making sure that I find people that are really motivated by the purpose. I think that can't be underestimated. It's worth so much. And then I guess the legal aspect of everything, especially when it comes to developing a blockchain company, takes a lot of work.
Yes, that's very true. There's a lot of conversations going on. Will you be fundraising as well? Is that part of your process?
Absolutely, yes. So we are going to seed capital over the next 2-3 months. So we'll be pursuing that. So a lot of it is making sure that we have all our ducks in order. And, they say that a company is a collection of people, but it's also a collection of contracts.
That's a very good line. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah.
Collection of contracts. It's very true.
And you got to find the right strategic partners, people that believe in your project.
Yes. And what's the best advice you would give then to an up-and-coming entrepreneur? What's your golden nugget?
Well, I think technology has no value if nobody's using it. And so you really have to make sure that you're solving a global problem, especially in blockchain, because it's a global collaborative platform. So you have to have global ambitions with what you're doing. It can't just be sort of localized, because that sort of defeats the whole purpose of blockchain. And perhaps in government, it's a little bit different. But I think it's just making sure that you really understand the marketplace, understand what people need, and have an open mind to it. Because I think when I started doing market research, I had some conceptions about what people would need, and I realized that some of them were different. There is, in fact, a greater need for, in this case, I thought a lot of people were interested in online education because it's very important, and it is. But the greater importance is offline education, because one of the things that university affords you is the networks.
Of course,
and that's why people keep going to university. In fact, 85% of people go to university to get a job. And yet 66% of the students surveyed think they're learning the wrong skills. So they're learning the wrong skills, but they're still going to university. So in the end, it's because they think they can get a job out of it. So the networks at university are still pretty important. And one of the most important things to develop is the offline networks. Online education is great, but it should be complemented with offline networks with the private sector and industry leaders. So that's one thing that I realized pretty quickly in talking to everybody. And, had I stuck to my initial concept, then I wouldn't have been able to see this difference and get the traction that we're able to get already.
That is fascinating. And actually it does make sense, because people are people, and it's great. And again, goes back, I mentioned earlier about how, smartphones have changed our society, and, people tend to be more isolated in some ways because they're on a smartphone and they're not actually interacting. And you cannot substitute for interaction, human on human. That sounds dodgy, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People,
absolutely.
friends, and to meet people, it is pretty cool. Okay, so that sounds, I wish you every success. It sounds fascinating. I really like the idea. And I love the idea you're democratizing opportunity for people too as well. Because I mean, I go back to my 4 years in university. I didn't think about getting a job. It wasn't my final year. I went, whoops, now what am I going to do with this degree? And then as it happened, JP Morgan came and did a presentation, and I applied for a job there. So I got hard on the milk round. So that took care of that. But if you're actually looking for a job at the next step, and again, it's democratization of it, because it's accessible to people who can't go to university through funds or time or opportunity, or just even, as I say, expectation, but they want to work in a certain area, and let them gravitate naturally to what they like doing and what they want to do. And it makes it so much easier. I think it's a fantastic idea. I really, really like that.
Thanks a lot. I think, it's the right to progress. Like everybody has this innate right to progress in their life. And this idea that university kind of works, and you're totally right, kind of works on an exclusion basis.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy for the overall economy to exclude people. So we need knowledge, like you said, to go to the edges of the network and foster more innovation and a newfound autonomy for self-determination and the ability to adjust and progress. So we're right there. Now we just need to come together, support each other's projects. And I think specifically with blockchain, like you said, we can do this like collaborative network economy to create these new network effects and opportunities.
That's amazing. So tell me, where can people find you? Where do you hang out? What's the website?
Yeah, so the website is IfWhenThen.com. We're redoing it pretty soon. So we're releasing the white paper in less than 3 weeks. And that's really going to go into our global expansion and our blockchain technical details. So IfWhenThen.com. You could find us on Telegram as well. So IfWhenThen is our Telegram group. And you can reach me on email at adam@ifwhenthen.com. And we're always looking to collaborate with people or support their initiatives. And if there's anybody who's like a potential strategic seed investor who is looking to change sort of the educational opportunities for people globally, then please reach out to us.
Get in touch. I think that's great. Well, Adam, Thank you very much for your time today. I love your project, and I wish you every success.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. It was great to chat with you. Very, very enlightening.